Well, how did I come up with the idea? It started off with a range with a buddy of mine who had some issues. We were shooting at the range, and he was shooting with an AR-15 pistol, and the range master came over and said, you know, he can't really control the weapon. You know, we'd rather you not shoot it. Could you please stop shooting? So at that point we said, all right, we'll stop shooting, but got home that evening, and I had just bought a brand new one of those Pelican cases with the foam inside of it, and I took the foam out of it, and I basically fashioned by cutting the foam out in the shape of, you know, what looked to be, you know, the profile of a stock, but it sliced down the middle and it went right over my forearm. And I said, well, if I can fasten that to my forearm, it'd be fantastic. So I did that, and the idea seemed to work. So I went out to the hobby shop and I bought myself one of those. Basically, it's a rubber kit, and I made a mold for it, and it came out with the first prototype, which worked great. There wasn't any issue. In the meantime, while that was going on, because the patent takes quite some time to do, you know, I started writing a letter to ATF asking them if this thing was going to be something I could do, because I didn't know anything about SBRs or, you know, NFA items or anything like that. So I understood that there was some kind of complication behind it. I didn't understand the implications of it, but I knew that the best thing to do was to write to ATF FTB. And I fashioned a letter, sent that out to them on November 17th of 2012. And 2 weeks later, I got a response from them. Talk about government efficiency. And they said it was okay, as long as the intent of the product was to fire the weapon as it was defined, that is, a pistol with one hand. They were okay with it. And from there, this was November 27th, I think was the date that I got it back. Shortly thereafter, you know, the Sandy Hook incident happened, and, you know, I began to think, well, maybe this is not such a good idea. You know, everybody second guesses themselves at some point in their life. But my wife said, no, you got to go forward. And SHOT Show was 2 months after that. It was in January. And with a person who I just met, who later became my business partner, we went to SHOT Show 2013 and pitched it to a whole bunch of different companies. And oddly enough, everybody wanted it. So we had our choice, you know, who we wanted to work with, and we decided to work with Sig Sauer. They seem to be, you know, a good partner and a good match, and so far it seems to be working out pretty well. Well, it's funny because Sig Sauer, when they first took on the product, you know, Sig Sauer has their own ATF compliance officer. And, you know, I think a lot of people, they get hung up about the product and about, you know, how it can also be used as a stock. And, you know, a lot of people bash the government agencies. They bash the ATF, you know, because they call it the Bureau of Alcohol, Tobacco, and Big Fires or something like that. And I guess what they're you know, insinuating is that, you know, either Ruby Ridge or whatever, one of the many fiascos that the ATF has gone through. But in reality, you know, the ATF is an efficient agency, and, you know, when they saw the product, they understood it, they vetted it, they looked at it, they understood. I'm sure they understood that there could have been, you know, implications where the product, because aesthetically, if you looked at it from a profile, it looked like a stock. You know, the way that it's designed and the way that it's made allow it to be used as a stock, but it's not a very efficient stock because the rubber it's rubber, it's malleable. A stock is supposed to be, you know, rather firm. The military stocks are supposed to be used in combat. In fact, you know, as a former Marine, they train you to use that stock as a weapon. The stabilizing brace, there's no way, unless you want to hit somebody with a padded object, there's nothing that you're not going to be hurting anybody with that thing. But, you know, the ATF has vetted it. The ATF they've looked at it, they have approved it. The compliance officer for Sig Sauer looked at it, and I'm sure he went through a series of phone calls to his friends at ATF, and, you know, before Sig picked it up, you know, it was thought about. You know, there was a long process that you know, but from the time that they said they wanted the product to the time that we had a signed contract, I would say that a good 3 to 4 months went by. So, you know, we discussed it, you know, thoroughly before, you know, we went to the public with it. And when we went to the public with it at the NRA show of 2013, it was, you know, immensely successful. The best people to go through right now, I mean, obviously companies like RSR, which are, you know, big distributors, they know who to speak to at Sig. But, you know, for end users, the best place to go to for the product is to go to the Sig Sauer website. You know, obviously eBay is out there, Amazon. I've seen some of the, you know, the more rare FDE braces sell for $220 on eBay. You know, that's not, sometimes you can get a great deal out there, but, you know, I would definitely suggest going through some of the distributors or directly through Sig Sauer if that's if any other option is not available. With Century, you can go directly through Century as well. But again, there's a lot of distributors that are out there that are selling the product as well. Natchez, I know that Cheaper Than Dirt had it on their website for a while. You know, there's a few other distributors that are out there. But if you go directly to Century Arms, they'll be able to point you out in the right direction. In the beginning, ideally, when I thought of it, I thought, well, if you have a large framed pistol and you've got somebody with limited mobility, the whole purpose of the Rangemaster coming over was because we were trying to shoot it, and basically the weight of the weapon was just, you know, he had to overcome that weight, and it was just too much weight. Obviously, you stick a 30-round mag in there, and, you know, you end up spraying and praying that you hit the target at some point. So, you know, the whole purpose of having a brace strapped to your forearm is to allow those with some kind of handicapped or even limited mobility. You don't necessarily have to have a lost limb to be able to enjoy the product. You know, you can have some kind of limited mobility. You've got arthritis, you've got, you know, less strength. My wife, she's, you know, she's not weak by any stretch of the imagination, but, you know, she's not as strong as, you know, your average guy. So holding up, you know, a 6.5-pound gun with a 1-pound magazine, it's difficult to do unless the weapon is actually strapped to your forearm. So, you know, the whole purpose of the weapon system with the brace on it is to allow people with limited mobility or some kind of handicap to fire the weapon with one hand the way it was intended to be fired.